Hey Internet, I'm Kyles, and this is going to be the first in possibly a series of lore videos about Dark Souls 2. So, just a disclaimer, I'm making these videos because I know that a lot of people, myself absolutely included, are waiting for Vati and EMB's lore videos. And Silvermont and all the other people who make excellent lore videos, right? But I'm fairly certain that those lore series from those really great channels are not going to start for a while because the game has only been out for less than a week, and I know that EMB stated in one of his latest videos that he's definitely going to wait to start his lore series until he thinks the majority of people will have already beaten the game, because he doesn't want people to, I'm assuming he doesn't want people to watch his lore videos without beating the game themselves. He wants the community to delve into the lore themselves and come up with theories themselves, since he's a little bit not biased, but he's coming at it from a different angle because he worked with FromSoft's internal lore documents in creating the guide, so he already knows more than us. And so he wants us to do it first. And Vati, I'm sure, is not going to start his lore series for a while just because it takes an insane amount of editing and effort, which is why his videos are so incredible. So my videos are not going to be amazing or incredible or really entertaining or epic like Vati's and AB's, but they're just early lore videos because the game has been out for less than a week, and hopefully it will spark some discussion. So with that disclaimer out of the way, I'm going to talk about a few things in this video, and all of the info in this video that I'm going to be quoting is taken either from directly transcribed dialogue from the game that I wrote down myself, which should be word-to-word accurate, or item descriptions, same thing, or tidbits from the guide, and EMB has said that all of the lore information in the guide is either taken from the game or taken from Software's internal lore documents, so it should all be absolutely legit. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is the fact that Drangleic is in fact Lordran. Yep, Lordran is Drangleic. So a couple of you who have been paying attention might say, no, that can't possibly be true, because FromSoft said in multiple interviews before the game came out that Drangleic and Lordran are different, or that the game takes place in a different place, right, than the first game did. Well, it depends exactly what they said in Japanese that was translated as that, because if they said that Drangleic is a different kingdom than Lordran, that's not a lie, and if they said that it's a different place, it's still technically true. So it seems pretty FromSoftian to me that they would give an answer in an interview that would initially, before everyone played the game, be interpreted absolutely as one thing, meaning one thing, and then later after everyone plays the game, you could go back and listen to that answer and be like, oh, they were being a little bit tricky, they were being a little bit subtle, right? And I think that they were. So I'm going to talk to you about the cycles of the flame and the dark, the death and rebirth of the kingdom. And this is some really new information that we didn't get anything alluding to this in the first Dark Souls, and I think that there's a reason for that, which I'll talk about in a minute. So many NPCs allude to this. Many NPCs tell you something to the effect of, many kingdoms have risen and fallen on this very spot, on this same spot. But Striad of Olafus tells you the most. When you unpetrify him, he says, so, how long was I sat petrified? Long enough for the old kingdom to have crumbled, I see. Why didn't anyone wake me sooner? Drangleic. I've never heard the name. Is that what they call this place now? Very good indeed. Many kingdoms rose and fell on this tract of earth. Mine was by no means the first. Anything that has a beginning also has an end. No flame, however brilliant, does not one day splutter and fade. But then, from the ashes, the flame reignites, and a new kingdom is born, sporting a new face. It is all a curse, and it is your accursed flesh that will inherit the flame. So this is one of the more lore-intensive dialogues in the whole game from everything I've found. He tells you that not only have many kingdoms risen and fallen on this same tract of earth, but his was by no means the first. So we know that he was petrified for many lifetimes. I believe it's the guide that tells you that. And the kingdom of his day, before he was petrified, was the kingdom of Olafus. But he assures you that his was by no means the first, and I believe that Lordran was the first. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. And perhaps Drangleic is the last? So Striad tells you that no flame, however brilliant, does not one day splutter and fade, referring obviously to the first flame itself. But he gives you some new info that we never got in the first Dark Souls when we were all speculating about the fire going out, which is that apparently after the flame goes out, it eventually reignites, and a new kingdom is born sporting a new face. However, he proclaims English, rather darkly and nihilistically, that it is all a curse, and it is your cursed flesh that will inherit the flame. So Sweet Shalquar, the cat, who the Emerald Warden refers to as an ancient being who mocks your very existence, and who we have multiple sources assuring us that she is very ancient. So she tells you near the beginning of the game a little bit about her experience witnessing the cycle of many kingdoms rising and falling, and the flame going out and being reignited over and over. She tells you, "This place is already dead. Everything will crumble and waste away, so that something new may be born. Isn't it wonderful?" The Emerald Warden refers to Sweet Shalquar as an ancient being who mocks your very existence. Thought that was interesting. The opening cutscene also alludes to Drangleic being Lordran. Believe it or not, right? Perfect FromSoft style storytelling. You initially watch the opening cutscene, you don't perceive it this way at all, but later, looking back, listening to the way it's phrased and the way she pauses, I believe that FromSoft is hinting and teasing at this fact. The opening cutscene, the woman who many people believe to be the fourth of the four firekeepers, tells you, "Long ago, in a walled-off land far to the north, a great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drangleic. Perhaps you're familiar? No, how could you be? But one day you will stand before its decrepit gate, without really knowing why." So we know that many kingdoms have risen and fallen on this very spot, and if you listen to the way the voice acting is directed in the actual opening cutscene, she pauses before she says the name Drangleic. She says, "I believe they called it Drangleic," because she's trying to remember the name because it's had so many different names. Then FromSoft teases you a little and she says, "Perhaps you're familiar?" No, how could you be? Because you are in fact familiar. But if you didn't think that Drangleic was actually Lordran, and you didn't know that many kingdoms have gone through this cycle in this special spot, then there would be no way for you to be familiar. So she says, "No, how could you be?" But FromSoft's teasing you. You are familiar because Drangleic is in fact Lordran. So the biggest evidence for this of all is the four Lord Souls. The four Old Ones souls, the four Unutterable Ones, as they're called at one point by Shalquar, are the same four Lord Souls that you find in the first Dark Souls. The description of the soul of the rotten says, "Soul of the rotten, who writhes deep within the gutter, the rotten embraces all in his sanctuary for all things unwanted or tossed away. A patchwork entity born from the amalgamation of lost souls and the withered bodies they inhabited. Over time, the rotten absorbed so many life forces that he came to possess a wondrous soul of his own. He dwells deep below the surface world, embracing all that arrive at his sanctuary for things unwanted or thrown away, and granting them new life as a part of himself." So that description was from the guide, and there it's alluding to the fact that the game tells you that the well in the middle of Majula in the past was something where they would throw away the bodies of the unwanted, perhaps from Aldean experiments, or maybe from kingdoms that existed in cycles entirely before Drangleic. So the rotten eventually came to possess a wondrous soul of his own, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Duke's Dear Freya. Well, if you kill Binhart, you can get the Blue Moon Greatsword, Binhart of Jugo. The Blue Moon Greatsword's description says, "The blade of this greatsword shines like the brilliant rays of the moon. In the oldest legends, rarely spoken of today, it is said that the sword was born of a great white being. Then, what explains this lifeless weapon? Perhaps there has been some mistake. However, you can acquire the real Moonlight Greatsword by trading in a certain soul, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The Lost Sinner. The lost sinner eternally punishes herself for the sins of her past. Indeed, she committed what some would believe to be the ultimate sin. She attempted to relight the first flame. The lost sinner possesses the soul of the old witch of Izalith. Eons have passed since the legendary witch walked the land, but such was her power that it persists even now." So there's more alluding to the fact that Lordran was probably, very likely, the first of all the kingdoms in this cycle. And there have been many, 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 many in between Lordran and Drangleic. Eons have passed. The Old Iron King soul says, "Soul of the Old Iron King, who succumbed to the flames that swallowed his castle. The Iron King's flesh was charred, and his soul possessed by the things that lurk below. A powerful but short-sighted king who exalted the virtue of might, the Old Iron King has been transformed into a demon. As his flesh burned away, his soul was possessed by the wicked things that lurk below. He possesses the soul of an ancient king from long ago, a king who met with a similar fate when he reached into the flames." Who might that be? Well, if you beat those 4 bosses on New Game Plus, they give you a different item. They give you the Old King soul, the Old Pale Drake soul, the Old Dead One soul, and the Old Witch soul. The description of all 4 of these souls has the same, and it says, "Soul of the Ineffable, this once magnificent soul continues to exert influence over the land, even after the Aeons have reduced it to these remnants." So that's the biggest confirmation for me that, even though there's so much evidence, that's the single biggest confirmation for me that Drangleic is in fact Lordran, because it says, "Soul of the Ineffable, this once magnificent soul continues to exert influence over the land." The land it exerts influence over now is the same land it used to exert influence over, and it continues to do so, because that land, the land that it refers to, is the same. Drangleic and Lordran are the same. There's more evidence for this within the game, such as the fact that I believe Hyde was Anor Londo. The only part of Hyde we have access to is a tiny little part with Hyde's Tower of Flame, but the rest of it sunk into the ocean, and you find a Divine Blessing there, which mentions Guinevere in the item description. You find a Lloyd's Talisman. Lloyd was Gwen's uncle, or was it his uncle? Something like that. You find Ornstein, and in Ornstein's boss room you find statues that are holding the Great Lord Greatsword that Gwyn wielded. There's much more evidence, such as the fact that the Gravekeepers are the Finito, F-E-N-I-T-O, who were given life by, quote, the one who gave us the first death, which was pretty clearly Nito, which is why they're called the Finito. You also find Havel's armor, you find Ricard's rapier, you find many, many things that could not have ended up here if this was an entirely different land. Most of all, if this was an entirely different land, then how did these 4 old ones find these 4 Great Lord souls that originated in Lordran? And why does the game tell you about these cycles of many kingdoms rising and falling on the same spot if it's all a coincidence? I find that impossible to believe. I'm absolutely convinced that Lordran and Drangleic are the same place. And I have many more things I'd like to talk to you guys about, such as Velka and the Pursuer, and the nature of the curse, and Lord Aldia, and many, many things, such as the throne, and Drangleic's existence relative to, quote, the outer world, and why things betwixt exists, and many more things, but we'll tackle those in future videos. Thank you for watching. Feel free to give me any constructive feedback. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not aiming to make the epic, hugely time-consuming, amazingly edited videos that people like EMB and Vati make. I just wanted to make some early first week lore videos to hopefully incite discussion. So if you have any theories, if you want to talk about the lore, that's what I would love to happen from this video series, is to spark some discussion. So you can discuss this in the Reddit thread that I'm going to be posting, or you can come talk to me live on my live stream about the lore, about any theories you have, about any questions you have, about anything, at twitch.tv/KYLOLS Kylols. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have fun playing this beautiful, wonderful game.